All righty. Good afternoon, good morning, whenever or whatever time zone you may be watching, or whatever day you may be watching. I hope y'all are watching with us live. We are joined today by another Marine. We've hit the Marine golden ticket here for the past week or two, getting some outstanding guests, some modern guests outside of the Vietnam time period force recon men that we've spoken with. And today we're going to be covering some interesting stuff because we're going to be speaking to not only another MARSOC individual, but we're going to be talking to I should say, Colonel. We're going to be talking about ANGLICO, which is our Air Naval Gunfire Liaison Company, and it is very interesting. It's very JTAC like. It's Marine calling in air, gunships if they're close enough to the sea or the ocean. So we're going to get into a lot of cool stuff here. But without further ado, we're going to go ahead and get started. Colonel Robinson, I hope you're doing well today.
Oh, I am. Thanks. And you call me Michael.
Okay. Old habit. All righty. Well, we kind of like to ask a little bit to get to know and get the early days. Where and when were you born?
So I was born in Orlando, Florida in 1967.
Wow. Okay. A 60s kid. 60s kid.
Yeah.
And I've already know this a little bit. We always ask this, especially the Vietnam guys, because of their parents maybe being in WW2 or Korea. But your father, as I've seen, was a veteran, a Marine himself. Could you talk a little bit about your family military history?
Oh, yeah, definitely. So I have an uncle who was in Iwo Jima, World War II, was a Mont Point Marine. And my father was a infantry officer in Vietnam. He served two tours in Vietnam. He was in 2nd Battalion, 1st Marines. And also during that time, yep, that's a great picture of him there. Matter of fact, that was right after a big operation. They called it at the time the August Caper, where they end up capturing a bunch of high-ranking North Vietnamese generals, and where they caught him by surprise. Basically, it's I have to sing you the write-up. There's a good write-up on that whole operation and how they surprised the NVA, because the NVA were used to them, operating in the area in a certain way. And they end up, planning the operation at a different time of day. They came from a different direction, and they basically end up trapping them and catching a lot of those NVA senior ranking officers. So
Wow.
he did 2 years, 2 tours, I should say, over in Vietnam. And matter of fact, while he was over there, that's when I was born in, Orlando, Florida, because my mother and I were there and my mother was there staying with my grandparents while he was in Vietnam. So that's how I ended up being born in Orlando, Florida. And then when he came, came back from Vietnam, his first tour he did was on recruiting duty. They sent him to recruiting duty out of Atlanta in the early 70s. Did that. Then he went to 5th Marines, was a company commander in 5th Marines. After that, ended up going to 8th and I, was a company commander at 8th and I, ceremonial detail there, and served a variety of jobs in the Marine Corps. And then his last job before he retired was he was a commanding officer. At that time, it was called Delta Company on embassy duty. So Delta Company was based out of Panama, and it had security for all the embassies in Central South America. So that was the last job he retired out of. And he had a pretty exciting time because that was the late 80s when, as you know, really Central America was on fire with a lot of civil wars. A lot of the communist movements were going on, especially in El Salvador, Nicaragua. So his unit that embassy guard unit, Delta Company, was the first company, embassy guard unit company since Vietnam to get a presidential unit citation because of all the operations they had, been in and firefights with in the various countries in El Salvador, because the embassies in Panama, El Salvador were constantly, being shot at. We had 4 Marines basically on their free time in El Salvador were assassinated. A drive-by guy drove by on a motorcycle while they were sitting in a cafe and killed them all. So that was a very harrowing time in the late 80s in Central America.
Oh yeah, and with the drugs, the car.
Yeah.
I don't know if I'll get trouble for saying it, but the drug organizations were hot and heavy at that point in time down there too.
Exactly.
Man. Wow.
Exactly. So yeah, so he retired. In terms of while I was growing up, being military, as they call them, brats. I hate that term though. That's the worst term to call them. I don't know where that came from, brats, because you're the most furthest thing away from being a brat. But we lived all over. He was stationed, of course, in Camp Pendleton. He was stationed 8th and I in Washington, D.C. at the barracks there. Stationed overseas a lot, of course. He was in also stationed with the Army at Fort Lewis back in the 80s as a Marine liaison officer, and he would test all of the new Army weapons and then report back to the Marine Corps to say, okay, yeah, we should buy this or we shouldn't buy it. Like back then, they were testing the light armored vehicles the Marine Corps ended up having, the dune buggies, all sorts of weapon systems. So yeah, he would do that while he was with the Army, and then report back and advise the Marine Corps if we wanted to go in with the Army, because it's a lot cheaper when you go in with the Army when it comes to weapon systems versus just Marine Corps buying something on its own.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, with that, I growing up, I lived all over. Went to 3 different high schools. Went to high school in Quantico, Virginia. Then I did 2 years, my sophomore and junior year up at Fort Lewis when he was stationed up there in the 80s. And then my senior year was in Fallbrook. I graduated from Fallbrook in California when he was at Pendleton with 5th MEB at the time. So yeah, it was a good. I didn't mind moving around. That as a kid, really until I got to high school, I wanted to stay in one spot, even though I ended up going to 3 different high schools, because I was into sports, and I wanted to get a scholarship to college. And every time you moved, you had to reprove yourself in terms of
not only friends but sports and everything.
To another state, you were starting from scratch. So that was kind of frustrating. Yeah, exactly.
That's tough. I mean, what an illustrious career though. You're with your grandfather and your father though. I mean that is outstanding. And my father was a military brat as well and moved around quite a bit. But it seems like you again, military brats. It seems like you guys adapt quite well. It's a tough life, like you said, having to, especially if you do move a lot, you have to adapt and overcome. And it seems to go ahead and get y'all in a mindset to where y'all are ready for even if you don't join the military, you're gonna be productive because you're having to, like you said, prove yourself and can constantly up the ante here, shall we say. Yeah. Did you mentioned sports and you've got family military? Oh, go ahead.
It made me a better person, and the kids tend to be more well-rounded because they've had to travel the world, meet new friends, and interact with a lot of people. Their social skills tend to be better, tend to be more well-grounded. So no, it definitely was a plus on that side.
Absolutely. And you mentioned the military, family military history, and as well as playing sports. and I can imagine you traveling around. You're probably pretty good because you're proving yourself, and if you're playing everywhere you go, you're having to make these teams. Are you thinking? Have you already thought about the military, or have you thought maybe I'm going to go to college either for sports or I just want to go to college?
Yeah, so it's interesting you asked that, because I would say up until around when I was up till middle school, like 13 years old, I was thinking military. I was maybe thinking about being a pilot, going to the Naval Academy to be a pilot. And then, after getting out of the Naval Academy, becoming a pilot, then I would play, me and my friends back at that time, we would play those tactical decision games. I don't know if you ever heard of them, but they were like board games called a Squad Leader, Panzer Blitz. But they're essentially the games, detailed tactical games, decision games that last days, because you're doing movements in real time. And it fast forward, once I joined the military, and years later, the Marine Corps started mandating, did a lot of it's personnel end up to do professional military education by playing those games. But yeah, I was doing that like at 12 years old with my friends on the weekend. We'll just start on a Friday, and the battle would last all the way through that Sunday night. But yeah, so at that time I was thinking military. But then when I got to high school, I was pretty good in football and in soccer, or not soccer, but my own kids are good at soccer, but track. And so I started focusing on, wanting to go to college, get a scholarship, play football, run track, which I ended up doing. And so my mind was off of, the military. I was going to be a professional football player in my mind, until I got, hurt in college. And so once the dream and the realization that, professional sports is not going to be your livelihood, I started trying to figure out what I wanted to do once I graduated. And at the time, I think it was my sophomore year, one of my roommates, who was a year ahead of me, he ended up joining the Marine Corps, and he would have to go to training, like run the physical fitness test at the base in San Diego there, the recruit depot there. And he would ask me to go help him, on the 3-mile run to help pace him. So of course, at the time, I wasn't planning on joining the Marine Corps. I was just out there helping him, pace and run. My intent, I majored in criminal justice in college, so I was thinking about going to the LAPD or California Highway Patrol. I had some friends that had done that, so I was kind of bouncing around, that idea as a career once I graduated from college. But I still wasn't sure at the time. And so, of course, when I would go help my buddy and pace him on the physical fitness test, the selection officer would start hitting me up. He's like, "Hey, you ever thought about joining the Marine Corps? And you can go in and you don't have to be committed but just 4 years, or you can go." First, he told me about just going to a platoon leaders course where you go. It's like the officer boot camp at Quantico, where you go 2 6-week summers. And then after you graduate from college, and you get commissioned as second lieutenant. So he was like, "Yeah, you can just go this first 6 weeks for this summer. And if you don't like it, then, it's no commitment. It's only after, you do your second 6 weeks. And if you make it through that, then, you get commissioned once you graduate." So I was like, okay, what the hell? I hadn't made a decision about joining the Los Angeles Police Department or going to California Highway Patrol. So I went through, the platoon leaders course program, which is, officer candidate school, and made it through that. And then once I graduated, I decided that, okay, I don't want to go to LAPD, because at that time too, in the 80s, the late 80s, when I graduated in 89 from college, there was the cocaine, wars going on in LA. There was a lot of gang activities. Yeah, it was pretty bad. So it's like, yeah, I don't want to deal with, all of that craziness, even though they were paying a lot starting out, but they were paying a lot because it was, very hazardous duty. But so make a long story short, I said, oh, I'll just join the Marine Corps then, do 4 years, give me more time to figure out what I really want to do in life. And then after I do my 4 years, I'll get out and do whatever I figure out what I want to do. But those 4 years turned into 30. So I ended up staying a little bit longer.
Wow. So you've and yeah, I can see that was as good as it is helping the community out and being a law enforcement officer. Much respect to all of our men in blue. That time period as a young guy getting with the LAPD, that would have been very, very rough and quite deadly. I think you going the Marine Corps route was probably, well, clearly it was the right decision, but even looking back, not knowing, it looks like the better decision.
Definitely.
So you finished the course and such. Or what's next here? Are you signing up to go to MRCD San Diego, or where are you going next?
Yeah, so with officers, so if you're enlisted, you would go to, if you're west of the Mississippi, you would go to San Diego to go to boot camp. And of course, if you're east of the Mississippi, you go to Parris Island to go to boot camp. But all officers go to Quantico, Virginia. Oh. So yeah, once I graduated college, went to Quantico, Virginia, and all Marine officers do 6 months there of, they call it the basic course, TBS. And essentially, what that does, it teaches every Marine Corps officer how to be an infantry officer, because no matter if you're going to be a pilot, a lawyer, artillery, supply person, you name it, no matter what your specialty is going to be, all Marine officers have to start out at the basic school to do 6 months there, which is teaching you how to be an infantry officer, because that's everyone else is in support when it comes to the infantry. That's what the Marine Corps is centered around, supporting the infantry. And so they want you to have an understanding of what that entails on the ground, so that then once you go off and do whatever your specialty is, you still have that understanding and have that leadership. So yeah, did 6 months of the basic school. And then while you're there, where all officers get whatever their specialty is going to be is decided, except some guys come in already knowing they're going to be pilots, or like have a lawyer contract. So they already know while they're there going through those 6 months, but the majority of people don't know what they're going to end up getting. They know what they want, but they don't know what they may get. So I end up getting artillery, military occupational specialty, MOS. And after 6 months in Quantico, all artillery officers that are selected for artillery end up going to Fort Sill. And so it's a combined school. The Army and Marine Corps have a combined, school there in Fort Sill to do your basic artillery course. So I did 5 months while I was there. It was a 5-month school. And during that time, while I was there, matter of fact, is when the Gulf War kicked off while I was in school. So by the time I graduated, Gulf War was over. My first assignment was in Japan with 12th Marines. I was in 4th Battalion, 12th Marines. And in that, while I was there, I held my first job was as a forward observer, calling in artillery strikes. And then after being a forward observer, I ended up transitioning to be a guns platoon commander. So I was in charge of all the guns in the 6-gun battery. So that was my first assignment in Japan. And then after leaving Japan, I got orders to Parris Island, South Carolina, to oversee recruit training. So I was a series commander initially in 3rd Recruit Training Battalion, overseeing all the drill instructors that train all of the recruits. And then halfway through that, I end up once I picked up captain, and then I end up getting company command of range company. So I end up overseeing all of the rifle range training, rifle and pistol range training out there at Parris Island. So I had under me, you know, all of the marksmanship instructors, the warrant officers, everyone that instructed the recruits in marksmanship. So after my time at Parris Island was up, then I got orders to the Amphibious Warfare School. At the time, that's what they've changed the name since then, but at that time it was called Amphibious Warfare School. And that's where most captains at your captain level, that's your first really professional military education school that you go to. And it's a year-long school. There are officers there, not just majority, of course, is the Marine Corps, but there are officers there from the Army, the Navy, the Air Force. There are officers there from other countries. Matter of fact, so it's a good school to start interacting with you know, a lot of your international peers and of course other U.S. counterparts, and then you learn a lot about how the Marine Corps operates, the Marine Air Ground Task Force, while you're there. So then after that school, I get orders to 11th Marines in Camp Pendleton, the artillery regiment there, and first assignment there was as the assistant fire support coordinator of the regiment. And that job essentially entails working in the fire support coordination cell that would, if we were going to war, would be sitting in with the division, the 1st Marine Division, fire support coordination cell, you know, coordinating all the artillery fires. So I worked in there for a while. Then after my first year, I was told that I was going to get an artillery battery, get command of an artillery battery. And this was like coming right off of a big desert Fire X in 29 Palms. Essentially, the whole regiment goes out to 29 Palms and spends a couple weeks out there in a big training exercise. So we had just finished that, and I was told by the regimental commanders, like, hey, you know, and this was I think June or July, and the regimental commander tells me, hey, I'm gonna give you an artillery battery. You'll get command, probably pick it up in November. I was like, good to go, appreciate it. Looking forward to it. Once this Fire X is over, I'm gonna take some time off, go to Germany. My wife and I wanted to go eventually. We wanted to go in October to Oktoberfest in Germany. So had made plans for that. And about 2 weeks after getting back from the training exercise, I get a call by the regimental XO, and he says, hey, the CO wants to see the regimental CO. So I come over, you know, walk over to the office, and I walk in, and regimental commander says, okay, Smokey, you ready to take command? Smokey was my nickname, because like Smokey Robinson, the singer, I don't know if you heard of him, but that was.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So he's like, Smokey, you ready to take command? I'm like, yes, sir. You told me, you know, in November I was going to get a battery. And he's like, no, I'm talking about next week, take command. I'm like, well, I guess so. And he's like, well, you need to pack your shit and meet up with the MEU, the 15th MEU in Oman. And I'm like, what? And he said, yeah, the battery commander that was on float with the Marine Expeditionary Unit, and 2nd Battalion 1st Marines was the battalion landing team that they were attached to. But basically the battery commander had been relieved for getting in a fight, getting drunk and getting in a fight while on shore. So yeah, I end up, of course, having to cancel on my Germany plans with the wife later that year, and packed all my stuff and linked up with the MEU, Marine Expeditionary Unit, 15th MEU, and we did the deployment with them. You know, at that time, we did what they call a West Pack. So you're hitting, you know, Singapore, you're hitting Jordan, the UAE. And, you know, you're getting off a ship doing exercises in all those countries. So yeah, I did that, came back, finished out my battery command time, and then I ended up being told about a year later that I had orders to 14th Marines in Dallas, Texas, to oversee reserve training. And I'm not sure if you're familiar. So the Marine Corps normally has a cadre of active duty personnel that oversee the actual reserve staff. So that's what the job. It's called INI duty, inspector instructor duty. So that's what I was assigned to, inspector instructor duty in Dallas, Texas. And initially I oversaw headquarters battery, 14th Marines, and then I became the operations officer, INI, for the regiment. So I did that, was there 3 years. And then after that, I got orders to Fort Lewis, Washington, to kind of same like my dad did. And, you know, the chances of that happening, it's only one Marine assigned up there at the time. And my dad did that job, and I ended up getting assigned up there to be a liaison officer with First Corps, the U.S. Army First Corps, up at Fort Lewis as a fire support, working in their fire support cell as a fire support coordinator. So while I was up there, of course, like within a week of me getting there is when 9/11, you know, happened. And so end up, you know, doing a lot of training those first couple years. And then in 2004, the Army deployed the first Stryker brigade that was ever deployed. The Stryker, I'm not sure you're familiar with the Army Stryker vehicles.
Yeah.
You know, okay, yeah. So that was the first deployment for one of those brigades up in Mosul. We were up in Mosul, and we ended up replacing the 101st Airborne Division. So the Army essentially, you know, they had touted that, hey, a Stryker brigade can cover the battle space of a division, and you know that's one of the great things about it. Well, yeah, it may be able to cover that battle space, but you still don't have the manpower as a division. So after, you know, the 101st, and General Petraeus, matter of fact, he was the division commander of 101st that we did the changeover with. But yeah, you markedly saw the environment go to hell after the division pulled out and the brigade took over. And it wasn't but nothing to do with the brigade's capabilities. It was just you didn't have enough boots on the ground, because you went from, you know, having a brigade in each you know, in the east side of the city. In Mosul, you had a whole Army brigade, and when you had the 101st up there, and in the western side, you had a whole Army brigade, and then you had a third brigade in another location. So you went from a brigade each side of the city to a battalion, essentially each side of the city. So yeah, we didn't have the numbers, and yeah, it started going to hell in 2004 after, you know, we switched out from a division to a brigade. But there was some great, you know, fighting that went on there with the Army Stryker Brigade. Did the Army leave the Strykers, or were the Strykers there still to help y'all out, or did they take those as well? No. So when the Stryker Brigade replaced the 101st Airborne Division, the Stryker Brigade is an Army unit. It's the 3rd Brigade of the 2nd Army Infantry Division, 2nd ID. So, you know, I was the liaison officer. I was like the only Marine on the staff of the task force. So essentially, when the Stryker Brigade went over, the Army sent over a task force headquarters to oversee the Stryker Brigade, which was essentially the ground combat element. And we had, of course, a bunch of different attachments while up there. So there are a bunch of different attached units. We also had up in that part, you know, you had the CIA up there at the time hunting, you know, high value targets. You had the FBI, believe it or not, they don't allow that deployment of their personnel to do that, but they were over there doing, you know, close target reconnaissance, helping out and reconning some of the high value targets. And then of course you had the Delta up there, you know, the SEALs, you had the GROM, which is the Polish Special Operations Unit. They're really good, real impressive. And then that was the introduction to MARDET 1, which was the first test, the test unit for before standing up MARSOC, before the Marine Corps, went into SOCOM. So, yeah, it was a combination of people up there, and my job, my official title was a lethal effects coordinator, and essentially what I did is I just coordinated all of those different groups going after, our high value target list, or I should say high payoff target list, while up there. So, I would conduct and run the targeting meetings that we had that would outline, okay, these are our top 10 high value targets that we want to go after. And then, during the meeting, people would start coordinating, like maybe the Delta guys would say, okay, we're tracking that person. We're going to go after them. We'll handle them. Then you have the Stryker Brigade to say, hey, okay, we're going after this other guy. Then the agency folks do their thing. So yeah, that was essentially my job, running those meetings and coordination while they're deployed there. So after that deployment, I came back to Fort Lewis, and then eventually, after that time, my time up there, I did 3 years on that job as far as port coordinator with them, with the Army. I end up going to getting orders to Camp Lejeune to 10th Marines. So I end up going to an artillery battalion, 1st Battalion, 10th Marines. I was the XO, executive officer there. That was my first assignment. And I did that for a while, and end up then getting assigned at the regiment, at 10th Marines Regiment. And then while at 10th Marines Regiment, I end up getting pulled to go help the 24th Marine Expeditionary Unit that went to New Orleans after Katrina, after Hurricane Katrina hit. And you had a lot of at the Army, like the 82nd, the Marines, 24th was the first military unit to go in there to help with the relief mission of all the people that were trapped or what have you. So yeah, I ended up getting tasked to assist on the staff of the 24th MU with that, and did that. Came back, and then when I came back, right around that time, the command slate for lieutenant colonel had come out, and I'd been selected to command 2nd ANGLICO. And once the command slate came out, I end up I had really I didn't have any big obligations to 10th Marines, just based on someone already replacing me at my job that I had there, and had basically some free time to kind of start with the same unit and commander who was at the time great officer. So I ended up on deployment to Iraq, and learn the job, learn a unit, and observe, which was very beneficial to me prior to even taking command. That was a big help that the previous commander, Scott Campbell, had offered me, which a lot of commanders wouldn't do that. They would be like, well, I'm the new guy. I'm not going to worry about the new guy until it's his time. He when it's his time to take command, do the changeover and command to him. But no, he really opened his arms up and let me, basically do some OJT before even having to take command, months later. So yeah, that was my first time going over to Iraq with ANGLICO, was in that mode as an observer. And then we came back, end up doing, this is like 2007, 7 time frame, then end up doing change of command. And then I end up deploying myself, as the commander of 2nd ANGLICO over to Iraq. And that was the 3rd time I had went over, and did that, the deployments. And then when I came back, I had gotten selected for top level schools. So, like I told you, as a captain, the school, you go to is the Amphibious Warfare School. Well, once you become a lieutenant colonel, if you get selected, you go to what they call top level school. And one of the schools for top level school is that the Marine Corps sends one officer to either at the time it would be to a regular college. So they would send an officer to Penn State, which would normally be like a logistics officer, because I guess Penn State has a real, good logistics supply program there, department. So they would send one officer there. They would send an officer to I think Stanford, the Hoover Institute, and they send one officer to Harvard. And that's where I got selected to be the officer at Harvard, to go there to do a fellowship at Harvard. So I end up going there as a national security fellow, is what they call them. And that was a great experience. Matter of fact, 3 of my Army classmates there who were there were the 3. Well, no, it was 2 of them who were the first guys. The horse soldiers that you saw.
Oh,
that
yes.
movie.
Yes, 12 strong.
Yeah, 12 strong. Well, two of my classmates were those guys that went in there initially.
Wow.
So it was great interaction and spending a year. Besides interacting and being able to learn and meet some of my fellow military peers, it was great interacting with the regular student bodies, student population, and you get to learn a lot of things. And that's one thing too that was kind of disappointing about the current SecDef stopping those programs. And it wasn't because it's been framed like you hear. He frames it, and the media frames it as, these colleges are forcing wokeness on our military. It's like, that's an insult to me. First of all, as an officer, it's like, I am mature enough and knowledgeable enough to not be influenced by, some viewpoints that I may disagree with from that college, be it a professor or other students. Matter of fact, the benefit of it, and this is why the military does this, sends people to those, officers to those colleges, is that you get to see their viewpoint and how they think. But on the flip side, you get to basically in class say, no, this is how we think in the military, and this is how things should be done. And this is why you shouldn't make decisions or shouldn't make decisions to do, make these decisions as civilian politicians, sending us to war in some place we don't need to go to war, or making other decisions that after we get there that are counterproductive. So it's a two-way exchange in terms of, knowledge, education, and influencing. So it's not a bunch of lefties influencing us, and then we're taking those back to the military, and now all of a sudden we're bringing, those viewpoints of Harvard back. No, it's us as military telling, educating them. It's like, hey, I know you think this way about something, but this is the reality of how, you should be thinking. And then the other thing too, that was helpful and beneficial about that program is that you interact. Like I'll be sit with leaders and presidents from other countries. So I sat in a classroom that, or not even, sometimes it was a conference room about the size of a large dining room. So maybe 15 people in there with the president of another country, or sat in there with the head of the intel services for Pakistan. So it's like those interactions, you don't get that going to any college, So that's why, it's very disappointing when it, recently that it was like, oh, we're stopping sending people there. It's putting wokeness on our officers. No, it ain't. It's not putting wokeness on us, and that's an insult to think that I can't think for myself and make decisions, and I'm going to let somebody at a college influence
that a Marine colonel is going to be influenced by a 20-year-old blue-haired crazy person,
or a professor, you know.
or yeah, exactly.
Or a professor. So anyway, yeah, did my time there. Then after that, I got selected for colonel level command, and I end up going to the Marine Embassy Security Group. Matter of fact, before I got selected, I got orders to go to the Embassy Security Group as a XO, the executive officer of the unit, and that's based out of Quantico. So the Marine Embassy Security Group is what oversees all of the Marines globally that guard all our embassies throughout the world. So I was the executive officer initially while I was there. That's what I went there after leaving Harvard, to be the executive officer. And then while I was there, I got promoted to colonel. And then after getting promoted to colonel, I got selected for command. And normally the Marine Corps, you know, they don't do it smart. They don't, like, if you happen to be at a unit or a base and you get selected for command, they'll give you a command like another total location away from there. But in its infinite wisdom, they made a good decision, and they selected me for command of that unit that I was already in, you know, the Embassy Security Group. So I end up, you know, taking over after being the XO. For a year, 2 years, end up taking over command after I got selected to that unit. So yeah, that was a great tour being there. It's you know, again, I kind of followed in my father's footsteps, so to speak. He didn't have the whole, you know, Embassy Security Group. He was one of the lieutenant colonel commanders when he was in, but still being in command in the same unit was kind of unique. It's kind of cool having that happen. And yeah, that was a fun job, real fun job, because essentially you're able to go to almost every country in the world where we have, you know, embassies and consulates, to, you know, to see and work with all the Marines that are, you know, that are guarding those embassies. And yeah, it's just a great job, fun, exciting. Yeah, you go to a lot of shitty countries, so to speak, but then you get to go to some good ones too. You know, so it's all in all, it's a great job. I mean, you couldn't ask for a better command as a colonel. And during that time, we had Benghazi happen, so it was a lot, of course, that came out of that. So we end up, after Benghazi, there was a lot of misunderstanding, not only Marine Corps, but also in the U.S. Senate and in Congress in general, about how the whole embassy guarding thing works. So, you know, people thought that, oh, there were Marines at every single embassy and consulate in the world. And it's like, no, that's not the case. We're not at every single embassy and consulate. We're at certain ones. And you know, of course, we weren't in Benghazi because, number one, that wasn't really even a consulate, because in Libya, the actual embassy is in Tripoli, and that's where Ambassador Stevens was basically, he had left Tripoli to visit Benghazi. So he wasn't, you know, if he was in Tripoli, no one was going to attack that compound, because, you know, it had all kind of guards and a proper building, defensive measures and everything else. But yeah, he happened to, you know, of course, be in Benghazi at the time. So anyway, out of that whole thing, when people found out, it was like, oh, why weren't Marines there? It's like, because we're not at every single location. There was you know, a big push for us to basically deploy more Marines at a lot more embassies and consulates than we normally would need to be at. So we end up, number one, having to recruit a whole lot more personnel to do that job, the embassy guard job. And we were able to, within a year, to get the numbers and push out to the additional embassy list that the State Department wanted us to be located at. Another thing that came out of that, we were able to create what they call the Marine Security Augmentation Unit, the MSAL for short. And what that was it's essentially for each region. So for the embassy group, that unit that I commanded, it's divided. We divide the world into 9 regions, and so each one of those regions has a lieutenant colonel, that would work for me in charge of that region. And each region has like 15 to 20 countries in each region. So anyway, what we created were these security augmentation units that would support one for each region. And what their job would be was to know every single thing about the embassy compounds in those regions. So like we'll just say, for example, all the South American embassies, they would, need to know all the routes in and out of a particular embassy, how the embassy compound is laid out, designed. And their job would be that, hey, if something started kicking off, they would be sent in to reinforce the normal staffing of the embassy. So like a Marine embassy, on average, they only have like 7 Marines there at a minimum. So a lot depends. That number could go up. It depends on the size of the embassy. But on average, it's like 7 Marines assigned to the embassy. So, and their job is not the whole compound. Their job is to protect the chancery, like where the ambassador works, where the agency, all the classified stuff is kept. Their job is to protect that one building. That's the last stand. So that's why you don't need, 20 to 30 Marines there, because normally you're going to have a local guard force from that country that's protecting the perimeter of the compound of the embassy. So it could be a police, it could be some other security force that you hire, State Department hires to guard the perimeter of the compound, whereas the Marines are focused on, that main building, the chancery, where all classifieds kept. So anyway, if something happened, the concept would be that Marine Security Guard augmentation unit would fly in to reinforce the Marines that are already there to help repel and protect, the staff if something happened. So yeah, that was a big change that happened. This is all around the 2014 timeframe when this all happened. The big changes that were made in the embassy program. The other change, the big one that happened was, so our mission was to protect classified information at the embassies and then protect people. But the number one is the information. People was second. But as you know, if anything happened, Marines, you're going to do both. But in terms of, if you came down to, you had to make a decision, it was to destroy that classified information before the bad guys got to it and overran the embassy. But after the whole Benghazi thing, we had to change that to protecting people and classified information second. So that was another just philosophical change to, how we guarded the embassies. And to be honest, when it came to classified information, back in the day, like Vietnam days and in the 80s, you had stacks and stacks of papers and hard drives that in case, the natives overran the embassies, you have to destroy by burning or breaking, all the hard drives, all that kind of stuff. Kind of like you watch the movie Argo, when they're trying to shred and destroy everything. Well, now a lot of stuff is just on the size of a thumb drive, in terms of information. So you don't have to burn a lot of stacks of papers and hammer a bunch of hard drives like you used to. And that was another reason why we didn't have Marines at every single embassy or consulate in the world, because it was unnecessary. It was only at certain ones. And even at certain embassies, to be honest, you don't need the Marines there. But the ambassadors, they love the Marines there because number one, it gives them prestige. Like, oh, I got my Marines, and then they just feel better. But in reality, in some countries, and you could think of some that it's like, why do we have Marines there guarding an embassy? It's unnecessary, but it's great duty. The Marines love it. So it's good. Yeah. And then, so I finished that job. After I finished that job, my command as a colonel, I end up getting orders to 29 Palms to be what they call Coyote 6. So essentially, I was the director of the Tactical Training and Exercise Control Group, which essentially trains all the Marine units in live fire training. So, 20 on Palms is the one place that you can go to and you can drop bombs, you can fire all the weapon systems in the Marine Corps arsenal. So that's essentially the Marine Corps' big unit training ground where you can bring, a division's worth out there and do fire maneuver like you would in warfare. You're dropping bombs, airplanes dropping bombs, shooting artillery right in front of you as you maneuver. So I was there. I did that, oversaw that training, was ahead of that. And then after that is when I got my assignment to MARSOC and went there to be the G7, which essentially at that job, I oversaw all of the unit level training for the MARSOC Marines prior to them deploying overseas. So basically, it was like their graduation exercise. It was essentially almost like the same training exercise that that I did at 29 Palms with conventional units, but instead I was doing it with MARSOC, Special Operations Command units, and the big exercise when MARSOC before you deploy. When you bring everything together and to show that you can demonstrate that you can do all your core competencies is just the Raven exercise. So that was like my main, focus was ensuring that was run well and conducted. And then I also had under the G7, I had all the doctrine for MARSOC, and then the schools and language. The language, all the language stuff fell under at the time G7. So, yeah. So and then I ended up retiring out of MARSOC is when I retired in 2017.
Dang,
that's your 30 years.
That is, that's the kind of resume you see on like an 80s action movie star when they're trying to find the guy to do the job that no one can do, that you see on the screen. You did a little bit of everything, it sounds like.
Yeah, I may not been the guy directly into action. The great people working for me were down where the rubber meets the road, but was able to coordinate and oversee a lot of things. And it was, I can't complain. I wasn't stuck doing one thing my whole career. Yeah, I was able to get all parts of the Marine Corps, to see all parts from, the recruit training part to, of course, the being in the combat arms units. So yeah, it was good. The embassy program, doing that. So I was real fortunate in terms of the jobs I got while I was in.
That is, you there's no way, a year, 2-3 years, that's not long, considering the job frames most military people get at in jobs. So you're not getting stale on any one thing,
right.
Continuing on and then learning and teaching,
Yeah, and that's kind of like, philosophically, it's kind of a difference between like Army officers and the Marine officers. So the one thing I used to admire with some of my Army brethren was their officers. They would stay in whatever their specialty was, like their whole career for the majority. Yeah. Like, so if you're artillery, if you're infantry, you're doing that pretty much your whole time. And with that, you get to be very competent because you're just, you've been in that unit for years and years, and the ins and outs and every little thing about it. Whereas with the Marine Corps, they move us almost every 3 years as officers, and it could be a totally different, has nothing to do with your specialty. You could be sent to a totally different unit. And yeah, you may not be a super expert in what your specialty is, but a little bit about everything. You're the jack of all trades, master of none, so to speak, as the saying goes. So yeah, I tend to like that, being able to do a little bit of everything in terms of excitement and rewarding. And then getting back though to really, I know what some of the focus was you wanted to talk about was the ANGLICO unit.
Yes.
So,
What could you explain Anglico for us? What is
okay.
Anglico?
Yeah, so ANGLICO, as you said, Air Naval Gunfire Liaison Company is what ANGLICO is short for. And it's a very unique unit, very misunderstood unit, even within the Marine Corps. And it caused a lot of frustration, more so with us, with the ANGLICO personnel, frustrated with other Marines and Marine leadership compared to all the units we supported. So just a short history. So ANGLICO essentially was started after World War II, like in the late 40s, and they came from the assault, what they call assault support units, that during World War II, if the Marines, say he would go in Iwo Jima, storming the beaches, Tarawa, they were a unit that consisted of like shore fire control parties, that it was Navy personnel and Marines that would coordinate all the naval gunfire, prior to the Marines and while the Marines were landing. So of course, it was communications heavy. People, you had to really know communications, be able to talk back to the ships, and airplanes in order to coordinate those fires. So out of World War II, there were that assault support organization. And then after World War II, they end up in the late 40s, right before Korea, ANGLICO was created, and their job was again to support the Marine Corps at that time, the Marine Corps and Navy in amphibious assaults. And then you go into the Korean War, and ANGLICO really started to come about then is besides just supporting Marine units, they were supporting Allied forces that were beside us, Allied and Army units. So that's where we went, just from supporting Marine units in combat to actually supporting Allied and joint, other U.S. units, and was very successful with various engagements there. After Korean War, various U.S. deployments that the ANGLICO was attached to and supported, all the way up to Vietnam. Second ANGLICO supported, went in, they supported 80, forget which Army unit they supported, but the first ANGLICO also, which was called Subunit 1 at the time, they did a lot of great support during Vietnam. And on through after Vietnam, various, Grenada, and you name it, the ANGLICO teams would deploy. And especially, you go all the way to the Gulf War, they played a big role in the battle. I don't know if you heard of the Battle of Khafji, where they were supporting a Saudi Arabian, military unit in the defense there, and the Iraqi army, had a big core level attack, and they were able to repel it, mainly with the ANGLICO teams. They were calling in fires to repel that big attack. So the unit is designed to support joint, Allied, joint and coalition forces. So supporting, the British Royal Marines, have a good relationship with them, supporting 82nd Airborne, supporting during like Iraq, we assigned teams to SEAL teams, to the Army, Green Berets, we had teams attached to them. Of course, we had teams attached to the other Allied units, like the British military, not just Iraq, but Afghanistan also during that whole time. And like if you saw, I don't know if you saw that movie Warfare that came out last year. It was about that SEAL team. But you saw they had an ANGLICO team, like when the guy's trying to pull that, which is they call it a rover, which allows, the ANGLICO team to connect and talk with the planes and to see what's on the ground there. That was a good example of how, ANGLICO's integrated with not only, the U.S. forces there and how they provided, that support. And mainly, like before Iraq and Afghanistan, ANGLICO would support mainly coalition forces, like during the first Gulf War, support the Arab, a lot of the Arab forces, the Qataris, the Saudis, that all those Arab forces that fought with us in the first Gulf War. You had ANGLICO teams, supporting that organization, and then of course, like I said, supporting the Army and other allied forces. But then once we got into Iraq and Afghanistan, we were more focused initially on supporting Marine units, believe it or not, internally. And it was because the ANGLICO units brought with them so many capabilities in terms of fire support coordination, being able to do fire support coordination, and then being able to do the terminal control of aircraft. So, the personnel in ANGLICO, they're trained to essentially, be JTACs to coordinate any air and do the terminal control of the aircraft, be it not just Marine air, but all, Air Force air, any air, be able to coordinate the attack and dropping the bombs of the air. Same thing to do artillery, call in artillery. And then, we retain the naval gunfire piece, but of course we don't use naval gunfire really anymore. But we still have that in the portfolio. So it was that JTAC ability though is what made us really a hot commodity during Iraq, that everybody wanted an ANGLICO team so that they can, because there wasn't enough terminal controllers, JTACs to go around. So the ANGLICO provided a lot of that terminal control of aircraft capability during Iraq and Afghanistan.
Man, that it's always interesting. And you mentioned not using the naval side of things. The gentleman I spoke to from Vietnam that was ANGLICO qualified, he only I think maybe twice, but one time to where it was actually close enough and saved their bacon. He called in rounds from the USS New Jersey, and I think they were like 16-inch. And he said it was like a Volkswagen coming through the jungle.
Yeah, that's what those guys will tell you. Yeah, it was being able to call in the actual fires from battleships and everything. That was definitely a lot of firepower coming in. Yep.
But you got to be on with that. He was always nervous about that first round coming in.
Yeah, you got to know it. I mean, I was like that even as a forward observer with artillery. It was like, God, please help this first round to go where I said it's supposed to go. Because if it doesn't, you're in trouble. And then getting back to ANGLICO. So an ANGLICO unit is designed to support a coalition division or allied a coalition division. So either an Army division or say a British military division. That's the level that is designed to support. So essentially, if we were employed doctrinally, my headquarters of the ANGLICO unit, I would sit in the fire support coordination cell of that division. Then I would have teams, what they call SALTs, supporting arms liaison teams. They would sit within that division's brigades, fire support coordination cell and help coordinate all the fires. And then the fire control teams are the lowest level. They would attach down to all the way to the battalions and support the companies, the battalions and the companies of those brigades with fires. So that's how, big picture, how ANGLICO doctrinally, you're not always employed doctrinally, especially during Iraq and Afghanistan, but doctrinally, that's how they were designed to support a division, no larger than a division size Army unit or another nation's unit, and support them. And that's how they would do it. So you're doing it at my level, at the division level. I would be, helping to coordinate fires. I would have a team at the brigade headquarters level coordinating those fires, and then of course all the way down to the battalion and companies. And those are the guys that are actually the firepower control teams. Those are the ones that are actually calling in the fires. and directing, those either air, artillery, what have you, onto target.
Man. And do you see is Anglico the unit capability are they here to stay with the changing of warfare?
Oh yeah, more so even now, more so than ever, because it's the dual capability is what makes Anglico so valuable. Number one is the ability to do the terminal control of the aircraft, direct them on target, dropping bombs, and then it's the ability, besides the terminal control, calling in aircraft and calling in artillery, it's the ability to do the fire support coordination piece, because that's a piece that a lot of people have problems with and they're not very skilled at. It's coordinating, deconflicting when you got artillery flying through the air, you got airplanes coming in, and then you got maneuver forces on the ground maneuvering. Yeah, you can't. To be the ability to deconflict and not get friendlies killed is a high level skill set. So that's where Anglico really is really valuable and has built its reputation, over the years by being able to do that. And just to give you an example, so Jim Capers, that the Force Recon guy Marine that just was going to get the Medal of Honor here in the next month, hopefully. I'm very good friends with him because he lived right there in Jacksonville when I was in 2nd Anglico. And I even met him before that. I met him back in like 92 initially. But anyway, he would come over. I would have him over to our unit to give some professional military education and to talk, how he did operations with 3rd Force Recon when he was in Vietnam. And then some of the, the MACV-SOG stuff he did. But he told me at the time, which I didn't know, he's like, when he had to, because he had to help build 3rd Force Recon from scratch, during the Vietnam War. And he said he recruited and got his best people from Anglico. That's where he got his best people from to build up 3rd Force Recon. And he said mainly because of the communication skills, being able to talk to anybody. Like we like to say, Anglico talk to God if need be. The communication and field skills that they had, and his best people. And you said, you have his book, but in his book he even talks about like his assistant team leader was an Anglico guy, and then another one of his guys, the guys that he trusted the most and were his best operators in 3rd Force Recon were former Anglico guys. That's just let you know, give that little vignette about the value of the unit and the reputation they have.
There's a good photo, and I think it might be in the book, but I know it's floating around online to where they're on a scuba trip, maybe at Subic Bay, or they may already be in country in Vietnam, and it's got the unit, and then someone put in the photo who was Anglico prior to that, or Anglico qualified, and I think it was like a 8 or 9 man picture, and I think 5 of them were Anglico, and I was like, wow, that shows you right there.
Yeah. And then this last thing I tell you, while it's on my mind, so I talked about the biggest enemies of Anglico was Marines, because senior Marine leadership, because right in the late 90s, I think it was like 98, the Marine Corps got rid of Anglico. They totally got rid. They changed their name to Marine Liaison Elements and reduced the structure, and was basically, a sideshow for a while there, really up until, 2001 when, we went into Iraq. And what happened was that their certain senior leaders at headquarters Marine Corps at that time that were artillery officers that hated Anglico because their thinking was that, Anglico takes away all of my artillery officers, because Anglico is artillery. Anglico, the majority of officers in Anglico are artillery officers, and then secondly are pilots. that are in terms of the officers that are ANGLICO. So yeah, there was these haters, senior officer haters in the Marine Corps that like, ANGLICO, they're just a jump club. That was another thing. They hated the fact that ANGLICO had the jump qualifications because we had to, because we were supporting one of their missions to support 82nd Airborne and other units that were jump qualified. But yeah, they hated that. And so yeah, they end up using that as an excuse to get away. So we don't really need ANGLICO. But then, of course, like I said, once the Iraq War kicked off in 2003, it was like, oh shit, we need those ANGLICO guys now, and then starting getting stood back up and everything. And like Scott, like I said, Scott Campbell, my predecessor, the second ANGLICO, he did a whole lot. He was recon. He's recon officer before he even went to ANGLICO, but he did a whole lot in terms of equipment, getting all the best equipment and training to get second ANGLICO up to speed and to be able to do the the great things that they did, along of course with first ANGLICO. But Scott, yeah, was really did a lot to get the unit back up after the unit had been deactivated, us and first ANGLICO, because when they deactivated the active duty ANGLICOs in the late 90s, they left the two reserve ANGLICOs, third and fourth ANGLICO. They left them, but we didn't have any active duty ANGLICOs. So yeah, I wanted to throw that little bit of history in there.
The Marines always have a strange way of doing things. I'll tell you.
Yeah, we do. Yeah, got to do it the hard way.
Man, and we've got a few questions here, and then I think we'll have a successful part one. I'm sure once everybody watches, we'll have to set up a part two for sure. But I've always been curious, with you having so much experience in the embassies and training embassy Marines. What exactly is a bit of a two-parter when a young Marine is becoming an embassy Marine? What is that training like, and what is it like for you training these Marines coming in to be an embassy Marine?
Yeah, so being an embassy Marine, Marine embassy duty for enlisted Marines is considered special duty assignment. So you have to be, specially selected to even come to the school for that. So like the three big special duty assignments for enlisted Marines is recruiting duty, the drill field, being a drill instructor, or embassy duty. And there may be another one now. I don't know. I've been out a while, but those were the big three when I was in special duty assignments. So if a enlisted Marine, when it came time for them to do something outside of their specialty, whether you could have been infantry or what have you, supply, whatever, and you needed to go to a special duty assignment, either drill field, recruiter, or embassy duty, in order to help get you to keep getting promoted and be competitive. So, I always used to say, I said, out of those three, embassy duty is definitely the best one to go to and the funnest one to go to, because you're especially as an enlisted Marine, you're out, you're not super micromanaged. You're in another country. You have your own room, because a lot of the Marine houses are these big, nice houses that are just really nice. You got cooks there. It's just great for like a enlisted Marine to be on that duty. So you have to be specially selected. So once they're specially selected and come to the school, they have to learn all the alarm systems that an embassy has, all the security systems, a lot of the diplomatic protocol, all those types of things, how to work with the State Department, the diplomatic security officers, because that's who who has control of them is the RSO, the regional security officer, who's a diplomatic security, agent, who oversees their day-to-day of that Marine detachment. And that's who the Marines are taking their orders from, are those diplomatic service security officers. So they learn, all the systems that they have to use, the security systems in the embassy while they're at the school. They learn, riot control, in case there was a riot, what to do, react drills, how how to react, to penetration if someone, either an individual or a crowd, was coming through in the embassy. So yeah, it's a full range of everything they need to know in order to be able to operate in that environment on their own. And then if you're going to a what we call a designated country, so those are countries where the espionage is high. So like Russia, if you're going to be assigned to Russia, China, Cuba, and some other countries where they're actually trying to, steal our secrets actively, and they have sophisticated systems, you have to get additional training for that. And you have to get polygraphed. This is one of the things you have to get, a polygraph, because probably, and I know you may not remember this, but in the mid 80s, I think it was 84, 85, Time magazine had a picture of a Marine in dress blues with a black eye. And what that issue was about the Moscow embassy at the time. So basically what happened was that one of the Marines, Longtree, I don't know if you ever heard that name, Sergeant Longtree, he ended up being compromised by a Russian spy that was working in the embassy, and basically, gave all our secrets up and everything. And it was a big, excuse me, super big scandal at the time. Wow. And that was one of the most embarrassing in my lifetime times that for the Marine Corps, for that happened. And it was a Marine responsible for the whole compromise of our embassy. So yeah, after that, there were a lot of reforms that came out of that for training and screening of Marines prior to going on embassy duty.
Man, do guys have to have a top secret clearance or anything for embassy?
Yeah, you got to be able to qualify for TS. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, that sounds like it gets pretty serious. I mean, as we saw this past week, the guys in Iraq having that gun battle with protesters shooting and trying to.
Yeah. I think that was Karachi, maybe.
Oh, okay, Pakistan.
Yeah. But
okay.
they beat back that attack. Yep. That was a good thing.
Some wild footage coming out of there, man. Wow.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and I remember my dad always talking about embassy duty and it usually being the strapped, squared away poster boy Marines usually that were picked for that, since they were out front and being the face of the Marine Corps.
Yeah, and not just the Marine Corps, the face of America.
Absolutely.
They call the nickname, for the Marine security guards, they call them ambassadors in blue, because, and I've heard from a lot of foreigners that are in the Marine Corps, foreign people that join the Marine Corps, and some of their stories that they said, hey, I joined the Marine Corps because when I went to the embassy in Honduras, that was the first person I saw and I was impressed. Yeah, and that's true. There have been people from other countries that joined the U.S. Marine Corps because of the interaction they had, their first interaction with the embassy guards. So.
Yeah, I mean that's and there's nothing like a put together Marine in his uniform, and especially the dress blues. I mean the dress blues alone with a Marine and it that's enough to. I know for a fact that's got recruits just on the uniform alone.
Yeah.
I mean, and let me see. We've got a few questions from some actually. Jed, one of our viewers, was actually a Marine, and let's see, battalion CO was Lieutenant Colonel Golden III, Sergeant Major Perrick, and Battalion Sergeant Major, rest in peace. He will not forget them. I got to 110 in May of 2004. We had a battalion PT pretty regularly. I'll never forget the day the CO wasn't there. So the XO led the way. He could outrun a deer and about ran us all to death. Hoorah.
Yeah, I can't anymore. Those days are over. I used to be able
to. Gosh, love that. hope he told me to disregard that because he was talking about Al Nasiriyah. You were, I forgot where you said you were. Oh, Mosul. And he was talking about coyote training. Is that what we called Mojave Viper training in the mid 2000s? Was this mostly MOUT town?
No. So that was conducted out at 29 Palms, definitely. But yeah, what we used to call them the CACs, is combined arm exercises. That was a training that all the coyotes oversaw. Was the primary training. Yeah, they did do some of the MOUT training that's in here, but the main mission of all the coyotes, and the coyotes are the guys that actually run the training for all the units coming through 29 Palms. Yeah, it was not just MOUT. Yeah, it was all over 29 Palms.
Wow. Excellent. Jed's curious how well you remember your Anglico Marines. Do you remember Hack or Norman, or both were 0861s at 110 when you were there and went on to Anglico?
Yeah, those names ring a bell. Definitely ring a bell.
Yeah, I mean, you've served with so many damn people. I mean, you have to have a phone book, I'm sure.
I'm better with faces though than names. When I first can see a face, then
I can imagine that the faces stick out immediately. Ever know what became of Adjutant First Lieutenant Ray Baroni? I hope I pronounced that correctly.
Yeah, Baroni. Yeah, you pronounced his name correctly. Yeah, he was when I was in 110. He ended up going to Iraq, and yeah, I think he was in the back of a 7-ton when it was hit by RPG attack. And I think he's doing well. I want to say he's from Pennsylvania, Pittsburgh, maybe, but he's alive. And it's been years. He's doing well.
Thank God. Wow, man, hit with RPG in the back of the trucks. Good Lord. This one is asked, and I'm glad I remembered this, and especially with you having such a wide-reaching and varying units and various trainings. What would you say in your Marine Corps career would be your most rewarding or most proud moment of your career? Which is tough, I know.
Yeah.
Or one that stands out to you more than most?
I would say, I mean, all the units I've been in, I really enjoyed every unit. But I would say, in terms of rewarding, was when I was the lethal effects coordinator with the Army, and I did my first deployment in Mosul with them, and then coordinating, up in Mosul, all that stuff in Mosul, high payoff targets, high value targets. Doing that was very rewarding. And then I'd say when I was a captain battery commander with, I was a battery commander, Sierra 511, doing that job, because that's the last job where you're really close to the Marines, and, and you're actually doing stuff, because as you know, the further as an officer, the further you get up the command, up the chain, you're managing, people. You're not doing a whole lot hands-on, but you're overseeing people, making sure they're doing what they're supposed to do. Battalion command, and then of course as a colonel. But yeah, as a captain, being a battery commander is where you're actually doing stuff, and that's real rewarding. Yep.
That's awesome. That's love hearing that, and especially you guys that make such a high rank, and it's you're wanting to keep going and work and doing your best. But all of y'all, all the colonels and guys I've spoke to, 2 generals, and every one of you guys have I would have loved to have just been able to get back and been with the boys. Instead of stuck in an office and handling stuff and putting out fires and
and it takes, I tell you, it's challenging, and that I would say is a challenge for officer as you go up the ranks, is that you need to understand that, hey, your role is different now. Your role, you're not kicking in doors and clearing rooms, you're back doing other stuff, and you got to entrust those people who are dedicated and trained to do those type of things. And but yeah, because I've seen. Matter of fact, I saw it up in Mosul where there was this was an Army unit, but you had a battalion commander and a sergeant major kicking in doors, clearing rooms. It's just like, really? That's not your job. You're more valuable, overseeing. But so yeah, it's hard. It's hard for a lot of officers to take a step back once they get to those higher levels. They want to be directing stuff on the ground. It's just no. You got people to do that for you, to train well. Let them do their job. That's how you can be the best, commander.
Facilitate them to where they can handle the job.
Exactly.
Wow. And there's a great photo. I used it as our thumbnail today, but would like to hear a little bit about what the story is behind this photo. I believe this is your unit in Iraq, I believe.
Yeah. So that's Second ANGLICO, and that's Ramadi. If I remember, it's Ramadi. And yeah, that was a team that I was visiting in Ramadi, and yeah, that's kind of all the ANGLICOs at the time adopted that Punisher symbol, and how we differentiate between the ANGLICO. So Second ANGLICO would have like a 2 in the skull, and then like First ANGLICO would have a 1 in the skull. But yeah, that was a Second ANGLICO, I think, SALT team at the time that I was visiting.
That is awesome. So that's Ramadi then, the hell on earth as it was known.
Yeah. They used to, everybody, the Marines just say crazy Ramadi. That was the like I said, like Warfare. That movie was very accurate how it depicted what's going on back then. Because I've heard some people like that watched that movie and that was boring. Mm-hmm. It was too slow. It was like, no, that was really how shit it was.
They were in one area and not moving around.
Yeah, and then all of a sudden, shit have hit the fan. So no, that was very well done. But yeah, Ramadi, and like if you read some of the books, a lot of people focus on Fallujah as like the ultimate battle, but which it was. But Ramadi, a lot of people will tell you the Ramadi was more dangerous than Fallujah during that time.
Every person I've spoken to, Navy SEAL or Marine or Army or what have you, that ever stepped foot or through Ramadi said that was one of the worst places they ever stepped foot in or went through. Yeah. It was absolute hell on earth for that period of time.
Yeah.
So, God, all respect to you men and the young men that went over there and served all over, but especially that had to have boots on the ground over there in Ramadi. Geez Louise. Well, I believe I've timed it just right. We're here at an hour and a half. And I said as before we went live, we always love to have you back on to talk. I'm sure people, once they watch, if they weren't able to watch live, they'll be asking questions. So if you'd be open to it, we'd love to have you back sometime for part 2.
Oh, definitely. No problem. No problem at all. Appreciate you inviting me on.
Absolutely, and I thank you for joining us. And is there anything you'd like to say before we close down for the afternoon?
No, just keep doing what you're doing. I think it's great, especially how you keep the memory alive of a lot of the Vietnam veterans who are getting up there in age now, and a lot of them not with us or are going to be with us soon. That's why it was so good to hear, when Capers, this week, we after the Senate approved his Medal of Honor, because he may, like any day now, he may not be with us anymore. So for him to hopefully be able to get that while he's still living, it would be great. So So yeah, appreciate everything you do to keep those guys' memory alive and sacrifices they made.
Absolutely. It's a absolute honor to cover them while we've still got them. And it's an honor to start getting to meet and talk to you gentlemen that have picked up their torch and are carrying it on through the darkness. It's an absolute honor. And, we hope to have you on again here in the near future, because it's been an absolute blast getting to speak and learn from you.
Well, I appreciate it. You take care. Keep doing God's work there.
Yes, sir. And I'll stay in touch with you, and you take it easy and be well.
All right. Bye-bye now.